All right, welcome back. Episode 34. Jeremy's out today, so joined with Keith, Gangl, Lisa.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We're in our new office here, a new studio.
New studio.
This is, if you're watching on video, it's very nice. It's a little bit smaller, but top notch.
Yeah.
The only thing it's missing
we
is
get to break it in.
Yeah.
First one.
Mhm.
First one without Jeremy. Perfect.
First recording in the studio too.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
And Lisa pointed out the one thing we are missing is a couch in here, so we may have to haul a cot or something in maybe to make myself feel a little better.
I don't see enough space for that, unfortunately, Keith. I wonder where that couch went. We should do
It was a nice couch.
We should do a split screen with you just sitting on the couch,
Sitting
and
upstairs
then we'll be down here. So episode 34. Since Jeremy gave me crap for this one last time, I got to go with Shaq.
Yeah.
So I looked up Shaq, and he did wear 34 with the Lakers. So I felt like that was
You're confident.
a good enough.
That's good enough.
Career with the Lakers to warrant him being on there. But then his Showtime partner Charles Barkley was 34 too.
Oh, that guy's fun. He's just fun to listen to, isn't he?
Those guys on that show are so funny.
Oh, he's so good. He's a classic.
Anyways, so
the one number you did miss, though, I like to call out here is Earl Campbell. Do you know who that is?
No.
Oh boy.
I only go with guys that I know about.
He was a running back.
Okay.
Just a stud for the Houston Oilers. You remember? You know who Houston Oilers are? Or
I've heard
the
Houston,
team. Yeah.
Wasn't that when they were like separate leagues?
No, that was when Houston moved to Tennessee.
Okay.
So
all right.
Just so you know. But I figured you wouldn't even know that. So
no.
Let's move on.
Does Lisa know? If I don't,
no idea.
Yeah. She's like,
better.
We didn't even want to get you down that rabbit hole, Lisa.
Okay.
How's everybody's Thanksgiving?
Start with you, Lisa. Go.
Warm.
Lisa, before we started, did say that we were right about her plane probably not making it down there. So
I mean, it makes it down there, but the time
makes it back.
So you were warm.
I probably would have needed a little bit more time.
You went to Mexico, right?
Yes, I was. Mm-hmm.
That's the first time.
For me, it was the first time. Yes.
Your impressions?
It was nice.
Yeah.
It was like a little bit of beach, a little bit of town. So we went to Tulum. And
very nice.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was
High-ender.
nice. Like ruins and jungle and monkey watching.
Oh,
and
a lot of
all
monkey
the
watching.
fun
Perfect.
stuff. Yeah. No, it was fun. It was
Squirrels
a good
to
time.
monkeys.
Right. Yeah, squirrels to monkeys.
The weather was good, I assume.
Weather was perfect. It was not too hot. It was like 85.
Oh.
So it was
nice.
nice. It was not too hot, but it was, it was good to kind of wander around and do stuff and kind of, it was the perfect mix between exploring and enjoying, I would say, and relaxing. It was good. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We had cold weather here, so
I know. I arrived back, but what happened during the few days that I was not here?
Did you guys bring jackets to the airport?
I did not.
Oof.
Yeah, right.
I usually don't, and I just tough it out for the first.
Right.
Did
you at least bring one in your car?
In my car?
Yeah. Did you have a jacket in your car to throw on? Oh, yeah. Okay, that's good.
I mean, no, we went with an Uber, so you jump from the airport to an Uber and then out.
No,
so
the Uber's probably warm.
Yeah, right. So it's like you don't really need something.
Okay. That's the worst when you show up from a warm place and your car is just
cold,
frozen.
barely starts.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah, that's bad.
How was your Thanksgiving, Tyler?
Busy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had two meals, I guess I'll call them, on actual Thanksgiving, and then we had another one on Sunday. So, I mean, the morning one was with my wife's side, and there was so much family there. Yeah. There was like 27 adults and like 20 kids. Like,
where do you fit
little kids?
The people?
It's a community center almost.
Yeah. Usually we do it in like a community.
Oh, you do?
Christmas we do it in like Steph's parents live in like a 55 plus community that has like this big space you can
banquet area.
Yeah, and so we usually do it there. But Thanksgiving this year was just at one of the aunts and uncles' houses, so it was
must
packed.
Be a big house.
It's decent. Yeah, it was a tight fit.
20 kids. Woo.
But then we went to my parents at night, and it was. I mean, my parents still made like a full meal, but it was just Steph, I, and the boys.
Yeah,
but that was good because it was a little bit lower key and more relaxed and.
A little football, I'm sure, to watch.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good. It was busy trying to manage nap schedules and whatnot around everything, but
good.
It was good. How was yours?
Solid, really good. I mean, I went to my brother's so that was my side, and good food and football on Thanksgiving, and then we hosted my wife's side on Saturday, and it was good. Same thing, good food and
You do host.
Yeah, we do host. Same thing usually on for the Christmas holidays. We'll I think host my family, and then we'll go down to her family somewhere as well.
Got it.
Still,
Good.
we're just doing 2 right now. As
Yeah.
you know, get a little older, we'll see where my kids
Your kids start having kids.
exactly
Yeah.
that road.
So you enjoyed Thanksgiving. I got attacked by a Mexican turkey. So
You did.
actually, yeah, had an
Was it a-
encounter
was it-
with a live turkey.
Was it a big one or a small one?
It was a big one.
Well,
Yeah.
you can't pet them.
He approached me just for the record.
Did he
but-
know it's Thanksgiving? I wonder. He's a
He is
maybe a little
like,
sensitive.
I take revenge for all the U.S. turkeys.
All right. Well, my hot button this week, we've been hearing a lot of news about layoffs. So some of the, I think, notable ones I'll go with Cargill, which is a private company here in based in Minneapolis. But they're laying off thousands. Granted, that's globally, but still laying off thousands.
Yeah, I think it was 8,000. That's a big number.
8,000 is
Yeah.
5%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you have Tyson Foods shutting down one of their plants. Microchip is shutting down a plant, which means layoffs are coming to those plants. Intel is laying off 15,000, which Intel's a massive company, but that's still a big number. And then Stellantis is laying off workers in Michigan and Ohio.
Mhm.
And that's a car maker. So my question to you guys is this just the start of this, or is this just a kind of some of these companies are just getting prepared for 2025 and they don't need those workers, or is this a broader issue that is going to start steamrolling into bigger things?
I don't think it's a broader issue. I think it's more company specific. Cargill's commodity based. You know, commodities were great, right? Inflation. If you're someone that's selling commodities, you were probably taking a little bit extra price on the way up.
Yep. Food,
food, right? Same thing. I think with Tyson. I think those companies maybe overhired a little bit, kind of where the tech companies were a few years ago. So I don't think this is broad based yet. I think economy's still fairly strong. So, but I think Cargill 8,000 is a big number, especially being based here in Minnesota. It was a little eye opening, but they probably hired a little too many, and there's probably some middle management, that you've been hearing about that trend for the last few years getting cut.
That's a good point, because we heard about layoffs back in 2022 with a lot of these tech companies. But do you think that was different because they overhired post COVID from all the demand and the ramp up in AI and whatnot? And so then they started laying those extra workers off that they realized they didn't need. So are these different than
I mean, I think it's similar. I think it's the tech guys were making a lot of money, and right. And so typically when you make a lot of money, you reinvest, whether you're reinvesting in people or projects. I think then tech guys, they started to see the light when things were slowing down. So then you had, Zuckerberg coming out and saying the year of efficiency. It was kind of basically started cutting costs, and same with the other large tech companies. So I think that was over hiring, too much spending. I think they more right size and kind of focus on their margin. I think that's kind of what happened to the commodity, at least my guess is in Cargill. Again, it's a private company, so it's hard to get a true picture of what's going on there. But my guess is they probably expanded middle management a little bit. Commodity prices were going up. You're making a lot, dropping to the bottom line again. So it's a little harder to see. They're such a large company, is why they're so important, but it's hard to see because it's a private company to see exactly what the moving parts are. But my guess is they're probably maybe going back to the normal state. They're trying to maintain margins, is my guess.
Well, I think I'll get to you in a second, but I think where it concerns me is the tech companies weren't necessarily like consumer focused, if you will, right? I mean, they quasi are, right? Instagram and Facebook and advertising. But I think these are a lot more consumer focused companies, like Stellantis cars,
especially Stellantis,
right? Intel, a lot of computers, right? Direct computers.
I'd argue both those two have a little bit of competition issues. Mismanagement. So that's part of their issues, I think.
But I guess where it concerns me is maybe this is a signal that consumers, and maybe it shouldn't concern me. Maybe it's just consumers are shifting their spending habits. But the fact that all of these have, especially like Cargill, Tyson, Stellantis, like those are pretty direct consumer spending. And so that's where that concerns me is our consumers that lower end is starting to feel a lot more stretched than we might be realizing, and it may be trickling upwards into the higher tiers.
Yeah, and we've heard that through the last couple of quarterly earnings is those companies are starting to focus on, the slowdown a little bit for their consumer so that they want to maintain their margins. How do you do that, right? If you're not selling as much or if your inflation is not driving your revenues up higher, you have to start cutting places, and you cut projects or people in some cases. So and I think that's exactly, and I think Stellantis is probably competition's hurting them. I think that's a little bit different. I think Intel is losing out to obviously Nvidia, which we talk about all the time, and AMD. I think that's complete mismanagement. So
and Intel tried to start up their foundry business again, and I feel like that's been a disaster for them.
It's been a mess.
Lisa, thoughts?
I mean, I think to your point, I think it has something to do with the consumer, that the consumer gets more price vary, more deal savvy, even a higher income consumer. And like the most recent example is like Walmart versus Target, where we see Walmart is doing good in attracting higher income people, and Target is missing out on that. That is normally catered to more higher income and more decorations and more home stuff.
Speaking from experience.
Maybe. But I think like with the companies like Stellantis and Intel and Cargill that you said, I think Intel has its own problems and there's a lot of mismanagement. And I think that's a little bit different from Stellantis and Cargill, which are more, like you said, more consumer facing. And when you drive by a dealership, it's like trucks and cars overall are stacking up. And it seems like nobody can afford a $80,000 truck anymore. No car is under $25,000, $30,000 minimum. Like, this is just crazy. And when you look back in 2022, where you couldn't get your hand on a new car, that has shifted. Cargill, like, even if consumers are not feeling it, but prices, like international prices, average international prices for foods came down over 20% from the peak in March 2022. So that hurt them, to your point, like commodities. So I think I think it does not really is maybe a broader issue, but we can see that it flows into that when it comes to how consumers are more.
I think it fits the theme that things are slowing, right? They're not all, let's go, all the consumer, let's spend. Consumers are getting definitely more, budget sensitive and kind of watching their wallets. And I think that's what's leading to part of what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we can transition this, but I just want to go to one more point. So does this allow other companies carte blanche into layoffs? Because no company wants to be the first one to announce it, but eventually some company has to, and we've seen a handful of them do it. So is this carte blanche for other companies as they get ready for 2025, get their, right? We're going to get guidance in January on where they think their earnings are going to be, revenues are going to be. So does this allow other companies to right size their workforce as they head into 2025? Or again, maybe this is just that one-off mismanagement of companies?
I don't even think I think it's more things are slowing, but it's more, I still think it's gonna be more the one-off situation. I think if you go back to last year, there was probably the same, we could have picked out 5 or 6 companies that had layoffs as well.
And this is usually when they start doing it.
And this is when they start doing it, right? They're kind of,
unfortunately,
unfortunately during the holiday season, right? When you're looking to 2025, your budgets and kind of how you want to, go ahead with your projects, this is what, the C-suite does. They go through their, what they need to do for planning. And unfortunately for some companies, it's going to have layoffs. And last year, again, I don't have the examples, but I remember there's 4 or 5 companies too, like, is this the start of, I do think the consumer's probably in a little worse shape than they were a year ago. But you touched on where things are for planning for next year. If we look at where the earnings expectations are for companies, I think it's 15% still for next year. That's a big number. This year, I think we're going to finish at, estimates were for 10-11. Looks like we're more at 9.5. We've been saying all along, we think 15 is too high for next year, but they're still there. So, I mean, if they're at 15, I don't see more broad-based, like all of a sudden you're starting seeing banks laying people off. I think there's, banks, I mean, there seems to be
I mean, we saw
healthy
we saw
situation.
real estate units
Yep.
get laid off last year. Wells Fargo is a notable one, but yeah, we haven't seen any banks or credit card companies or anything like that start.
There's some retailers last year that were, a little tighter on their labor force than they have been in the past.
Yeah. But I think this is a good transition spot because we talk a lot about, or at least I talk a lot about the consumer because I'm worried about the lower end. But then we have Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which I was looking for Black Friday sales estimates, and numbers are all over the board. Some companies are reporting like 10.7 billion, some are reporting 17 billion, like they're
they're all different.
But I think the general consensus was that in-store sales were slightly up, but online sales were significantly up, and the numbers are quite massive, which tells me that consumers are still willing to spend even if maybe they're stretched. And then we had Cyber Monday, which was up 7% from last year, which last year was a record number. And so this year, Cyber Monday was $13.3 billion spent, which makes me believe that maybe consumers are saying, I'm stretched, but I'm still going to buy gifts and stuff and just slap
I think
it
they're
onto
being a little more picky, right?
slap it onto a credit card. And
yeah.
I mean, maybe you have to break down like where they're spending this, and maybe that's the shift in spending habits. But there was one estimate that people are buying appliances, like the most purchased stuff or category was appliances.
Yep.
Which that's not cheap.
No.
Right? I mean,
Lisa, you buying appliances lately?
I don't buy any appliances.
Yeah, that's not cheap.
No.
but like if you're buying appliances, and maybe this goes back to the bifurcation between the lower end and the higher end, and the higher end is still just driving this train that keeps on going. And I don't know, we'd have to see. Maybe there'll be more details that'll come out here.
Yeah, I think that the MasterCard number that, like you mentioned, that 0.7 of in-store and 14% online, that just kind of like, those are big. The 14 is a big number, but it just shows you how much more people are willing to continue to spend. So much easier to shop from your computer, on your couch, at home. Just you should, and then a couple days later, your package magically arrives. So
it's so nice.
It's right, and I think that's. I look at my own Christmas habits of getting gifts. It's certainly it's 80-90% online, I would imagine. I still like to go to my Costco and pick a few things out.
Here's where I'll be interested to see. So our house has transitioned to doing like buying gifts earlier. So like most of our gifts were bought last month or like Black Friday deals. So I'd be curious to see how spending goes the rest of the holiday season.
That's what I just wanted to mention.
So maybe we see these blockbuster numbers, but then the rest of the holiday season spend isn't very great, meaning people are just looking for the deals. So
Lisa, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so too. I think you have a point here. Overall, I was very surprised by Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And like, you're just so tempted. And so were we, like, Dominic just strolled through TVs and stuff and like all kinds of weird stuff. And I was like, we don't need anything. But he's like, but they're so good deals. And I was like, that doesn't change that we don't need it, right? So I think you feel, first of all, tempted that you buy things that you not necessarily need because you just get bombarded by it. But overall, I was surprised by how strong the consumer seems to still be when we hear that it's stretched and everyone gets more deal wary, and also the high income consumer. Then you see such numbers, so that's very surprising. But to Tyler's point, I think because people are more deal wary, that they buy a lot of their gifts now and about a lot of their holiday spending with those deals, and that the rest of the shopping holiday season might be weaker because they did all their shopping because of that. And so I can see the rest of the holiday season, which is shorter at all because Thanksgiving was so late. So to begin with, shorter in the first place. Then we have a consumer that is stretched, especially low income, high income consumer. We talked about that. So yeah, I'm surprised to see what the rest of the holiday season will bring, but I can imagine it being weaker overall.
It'll be interesting because I didn't start until Black Friday. I thought you two mentioned that you have started before. Tyler said you did. So Lisa, you start before Thanksgiving for shopping?
So my shopping is pretty simple. I don't buy anything. So
Oh, boy, not driving the economy, Lisa. Come on, we gotta.
I really don't drive the economy. Yes, I mean it's easy for me. I do not have family here
That's true.
necessarily, so I buy it when I go home, which is in the later month, not during Christmas. And yeah, Dominic and I gift each other, I don't know, a vacation.
Nice.
That was our vacation.
She's driving the Mexican economy, not
Yeah,
I'm driving
exactly.
Mexican economy.
I do think the shorter holiday is something to be aware of. Again, since there are people like myself that probably haven't started yet, you're either feel the pinch and need to run out and buy stuff, or maybe you just don't because you run out of time. So
yeah.
it'll be interesting. I think the consumer is still in a decent shape. So I think the holiday season, and as far as these deals go, you know, you have Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and there'll probably be another day or two. There's no official name for them, but they'll have here's
more
some
deals
more
and-
deals,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I do think people are watching, and you know, now nice thing about all the different systems people are using online, you can monitor your whatever gift you're looking for. And
Do you guys? So PayPal has this app called Honey. Do you guys have that on your computer?
no, do you?
It'll literally track history of prices, and then you can compare like it'll say compare prices at 8 different stores, and it'll pull up 8 different stores, and you can compare all of the current prices.
And also the historic prices.
That probably save me a lot.
It'll track the
That'll
history and show
that'll
you
save me
like-
a lot of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier to track that now to kind
For
of
sure.
compare it, and if it's really a deal or if it's just marked down, which
Well, yeah, I was looking for a computer for my son's going to college next year. So looking at that and prices, you know, the same MacBook on a couple different websites are different prices. So it does pay to shop around on, you know, the Black Friday deals.
is it like
are,
major? Is it like
yeah, like $100 on,
Okay,
you know, some are
I mean-
150 cheaper than others.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the one that seemed to be the most expensive was the Apple store themselves. which
Apple
is-
will never discount.
yeah,
They'll
they do
let the
some-
retailers discount
yeah,
it.
So, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Shifting gears. So I wanted to talk about this, and we're going to do a nerding out segment here. But we talk a lot about Nvidia, and it's all over the news. You know, anywhere you go, you know, people talk about Nvidia. And so I thought it might be a kind of fun to bring up why people talk about it so much. And a lot of it is to the growth rate of their sales, their earnings, margins, right? So it's a very fast growth company versus, so like when we compare them to like the Apples or the Microsofts, the growth profile is very, very different. And so Keith, you talk about Nvidia a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a reason that you like Nvidia or think it always comes up?
Yeah, I mean, the reason it comes up because they're the leader in the AI space, right? If you hear artificial intelligence, what's the name you think of? It's Nvidia, right? Because they're the chipset that makes it possible. So,
And they're really the only ones that are monetizing at this point.
yeah, I mean, you got the other ones on the chipset side are, you know, AMD and Broadcom. They're there, but Nvidia's got the lead set. So now the next phase that we transition from, I think we're in that right now, is transition from the chipset guys, the picks and shovels, to the software guys, the systems. You know, CRM just reported, Salesforce reported last night, and they called out AI, you know, starting to benefit them as a software company.
Sure.
So you're starting to see that change. So I do think that will kind of change for Nvidia going forward. But the reason I like it and still like it and own it, I think we mentioned in the last couple of episodes that I've been selling some of it, you know, just because it had such a nice run. I just love the growth rate. I mean, the growth rate is, you know, 200% for, you know, year over year for their revenue. Just think about that, you know, from Q3 to Q3 last year. And I think now that 200% is going down to 150, 100. And I think next year the forecast is for a little less than 100%, you know, growth on the top line.
Yeah, law of large numbers.
Law of large numbers and competition, and at some point in time. So what ended up happening that I worry about for Nvidia is their margins, right? Their margins right now, you can get into that 75 to 80% gross margins. What ends up happening with when more competition comes in, the software guys are starting to get more power. They already have their systems up and running. They kind of, well, okay, we're not paying full price and a premium.
Or if AMD can get their
competition,
product
right? If it's
going,
close enough to it, right? There's more competition. That means pricing's coming down. What does that impact for a software company or a semiconductor company that acts like a software company?
Yeah.
Right to your margins, right? So then your EPS will start collapsing because their EPS growth, I think, is it's over a couple 100%.
Yeah. So I put together just some numbers here. So this is year over year growth on revenue for Nvidia. So last year at their last quarter of last year, they grew 206%. This year they grew 94%. So over the course of 2 years, they've grown by 492% on revenue. So that's in 2022, they grew by their revenue was 5.9 billion. Today, the revenue for the last quarter was 35 billion.
Just think
and
about
that's
that.
just quarterly revenue.
For a big company, it's not like you were just making some small widget and all of a sudden you caught fire and all of a sudden you sell them from 100 million in sales a year to 500 million. This is billions of dollars.
Yeah, so 6 billion to 35. And that's just quarterly. That's not annual revenue. That's just quarterly revenue, right? And then you get to their net income. So the net income grew by 1,259% last year. And then this year it's grown by another 109%. So that's over the course of 2 years, that's 2,740%.
That's crazy.
Their net income has grown by. And you compare that to like the other largest companies. Like if we compare that to Microsoft's net income over the course of 2 years has only grown 41%.
Only 41. But I mean, that's still a big
that's
number.
still a big number.
Like impressive. So it's not,
outlandish that Nvidia is. It's
right.
So
but
much
2,700% growth versus 41. Like that's why people talk about Nvidia so much.
Yep.
And then, I want to ask you, do you think Nvidia is expensive? Because you hear a lot about how expensive Nvidia is versus the market.
No, I mean, I like to look at growth rates versus, their valuation as well. So on a PEG ratio, which is, PE multiple, which people say is expensive. But then if you look at the growth rate we're just talking about,
it's a ratio of PE versus the growth rate.
So if you're say your PE is 30 times multiple and you're growing at, 30%, that's pretty good. That's a PEG ratio of 1.
Yep.
That's a good number, right? Stocks get expensive when their PEG ratio is above 2. That means you're paying 2x what your growth rate is. If you go back, Nvidia used to trade at like a 75 times PE, but now if you look at the forecast for next year, it's going to be at 35 times just because that growth rate's been so fantastic. Now, again, I still like it, still own it, but I'm more in the camp that at some point in time, these other things are going to happen. Your margins are going to hit. Your growth rate's going to slow more than kind of what the forecast is. I still think we're a quarter or two away from that, but we're certainly getting near that point in time. But I don't think it's expensive, especially when you look at the overall market. I think it trades at 22 times forward earnings. This trades at 33 times forward earnings, and your growth rate, I think, is at 55%. The overall estimates we mentioned earlier at 15%.
Yeah.
So 15%, 22, you're at, like 1.5 times PEG on the overall market. And this is certainly cheaper than that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I have 2 other points on this. So margins, you talked about margins with Nvidia, you talked about gross margins, but here's some net income margins. Yep. So 2 years ago, Nvidia was 11.5% net income margin. Today, they're sitting at 55%. So you talk about pricing power and being the only player on the field in this space. Like at some point, that's probably going to go away.
That's I think that fear that all of a sudden, sales start slowing and then you can't get that premium pricing. It's going to go right to your margins, which then goes to your EPS. That makes it more expensive again. So that's kind of where you're playing that game right now with Nvidia.
Versus like, okay, let's take a look at Apple. Like Apple went from 23% net income margin 2 years ago, and now they're sitting at 15.5, right? So it's a very different, you're looking at 2 of the largest companies in the world in a very different type of business. But I think the last point I want to bring up on this, and Lisa, I'll get your thoughts on this, but people talk about Nvidia being expensive. So 2 years ago, Nvidia was trading at a 58 times PE multiple. Yeah. Right now they're trading at 55 times. So the valuation really hasn't gone anywhere. But then you compare that to, okay, let's look at Apple. 2 years ago, they were trading at a 25 times PE. Right now they're trading at 37 times. And the growth rate for Apple is very, very different than that of Nvidia.
Yeah, significantly less. So.
Right. So that's where I think the argument of growth versus valuation comes in. And I think people argue, is Nvidia really that expensive? So do you think, I want to get your take on this, Lisa, do you think valuation on some of these other large companies are out of order, or do you think Nvidia should maybe trade at a higher multiple?
I think, like, to your point, it's like two of the largest companies in the world in the US, and it's very much different. And I mean, Nvidia, like Apple, is basically dependent on Nvidia, so that's just the big animal in the room, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that expensive when you compare it to Apple, which they have a little bit more troubles with the iPhone 16 sale, and still AI not paying out, and still have to do a lot more of investment into that until it pays off. So the valuation difference is very interesting here when you see at the prospects, the growth prospects.
When I always go back to like Apple, it's a staple at this point.
That's
like,
what, and ultimately
their ecosystem, like you can't Apple, everybody has, or I shouldn't say everybody, because there are other phones out there, but like what are you going to do without your Apple phone? Like they're charging you what, $1,000 for the phone. They could probably charge you $3,000 and no one would blink an eye. Right. So I think that's where Apple people just say, I'll pay whatever for it because it is what it is. And people are going to continue buying Apple products. I don't know.
Yeah. That and their services are so sticky that their margins are going to stay about the same. Whereas at some point in time, we talked about this Nvidia, their margins are going to start collapsing or at least going down, where you're not going to have that with Apple. So as services get a bigger part of their business, that, that's a little more valuable. But I mean, from valuation, I would argue that Nvidia is cheaper than Apple. So
yeah, when you look at the PEG ratio, which the PEG ratios are very, very different.
Yep.
So, all right. Anything else to add? Otherwise, I think we'll.
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Especially without Jeremy. He's on vacation and we're, no fun stuff today. We're working.
He's usually the loudmouth.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everybody listening, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.